It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. However you're watching this, on your computer, on your smart TV, on your cell phone, we're with an extraordinary group of composers, performers, thought leaders through the collaboration of Young Concert Artists and Washington Performing Arts. It's a pleasure to work together in support of some very distinctive voices, and so honored to present Stephen Banks and your vision for this very bold and exemplary program, and to hear more about the inspiration behind your program, your choice of music and collaborators. It's an opportunity for people who have watched and heard this program to see the many different textures of an artist's life. All of you here have many different things that you do excellently at such a high level. And artists aren't necessarily pursuing one particular linear career. The portfolio of work is so broad and rich and varied in each one of your lives. And that's something that I think is exciting about this too, that you come to this program with many different backgrounds and interests and experiences as artists and people. And that is so fascinating to me.
Stephen, congratulations on just a phenomenal performance, and to Saad and Carlos and Stephen for your world premieres. These pieces represent two worlds in some ways coming together and finding an artistic expression about different aspects of who you are, where you've come from, and trying to represent that in the music.
Yeah, well, I'll go ahead and start. It's great working with a superhuman, super musician like Stephen. Anyway, and it's crazy. We both come from similar backgrounds, and that it's gospel and improvisation, and then the side of classical Western style of music. And for a long time, for me, as a composer, I separated the two worlds, and it didn't click that I could bring the two together, and so with this commission, Stephen sort of encouraged me to kind of blend the worlds. I'm an improviser by heart, by nature, and what you heard is it's in Stephen's playing it's really an improvisation, but written down and all these things. So it really was a move toward bringing those worlds together, and I try to do it in every piece that I write now. It was a learning process.
When we sort of launched this national search for a composer for this concert, I did a little bit more digging into Carlos, and I found this video on YouTube. You were playing some gospel song, and you were just completely shredding it. It was amazing.
It was probably, I need to go back and mine those those old YouTube videos, but
yeah, it was from a really long time ago or something.
Yeah,
and I
playing Hammond organ, and
yes,
all right.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I think it was like 16 years old, and I think my mom actually put it on YouTube or something.
Yes, but when I saw that, I was like, this guy has a skill set that we are not seeing. There's something here, because it was just so, it was soulful, but it was also just like shredding up and down, technique for days on the piano. It was amazing. When we first sort of chatted about this, I really wanted to make sure that he didn't feel like he had to push that completely aside, because the way that what I heard in that recording was like such mastery. and I wanted to see if I could amplify that in addition to whatever we would do together.
How about you, Saad?
With me and Stephen, it's the backgrounds are very different. So it was a matter of trying to explain a little bit of my Arabic heritage to him, but at the same time saying, at some point you got to forget about it also. And we're creating something new here. So there is a little bit of a tension there, because there is a little bit of me that says, okay, I want to bring back the tradition of old, really old Arabic music, but at the same time, we're creating something new. And we're creating something for two instruments that have nothing to do with the Arabic heritage, the saxophone and the piano. So it was difficult to bridge those two worlds. But then I heard the recording today, and I was like, oh, I was completely blown away by how by Stephen and Zach were able to mesh those worlds together. It was so seamless, at least to me. And it just shows like how much time it takes to birth a piece. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of trust. And that's what I appreciate about Stephen's playing, and not just his playing, but the collaboration towards the final result is just as important as the performance itself.
The performances were so well shaped and so coherent. Hearing them for the first time, it didn't have that sort of world premiere sort of halfway to the point where it will be someday. It actually feels as though the work has really mellowed. And I wondered if how closely both of you worked with Stephen in the creation of the piece. Was there sort of a moment of listening to the way he best uses or wants to use the instrument that was important to you, or did you sort of work in parallel and then share sketches or deliver things sort of fully conceived?
For us, I found out that Stephen was going to commission me to write this piece pre-COVID. And so I got on the phone with Stephen and said, listen, we just need to get in the room together. Since we're improvisers, just get in the room, let's have a jam session, get some ideas, and I will fine from there. And then COVID, the pandemic, and we couldn't do that. So we ended up sending each other recordings of one another improvising. And then, it would sort of, I blended the recordings together to sort of make semblance of a piece and sort of refine from there. Remote collaboration is one thing that I really appreciate in this instance. It really helped me to be creative and intuitive with some of these things. But it's something about being in the same room together, which I miss, with the musicians and just sort of feeling the energy. But we made it work, and I'm grateful for that opportunity to just kind of do things remotely.
I mean, I'm not a performer myself, so being in the room with the performer is more about just trying to see what ideas they have for interpretation and basically trying to feed off of that or say, no, don't do that. It's usually more the former though, saying, okay, these are my 5-6 different iterations of what you wrote. Which one do you like the best and why? And that's the thing I miss the most, because with Stephen, we did a lot of phone calls, but there would be time in between the phone calls where it'd be like, okay, I have to go and do my homework rather than kind of do it more spontaneously. And that's what I miss about the in-person, to be able to make those more spontaneous decisions that way.
Stephen, were you very prescriptive, or did you make suggestions along the way about which specific instrument or qualities of your playing you wanted to highlight?
Yes and no. I think at the beginning of the process, with both Carlos and Saad, we just talked a lot. We had a lot of conversations about music, but also about our lives and like where we're coming from. Because I think that one of the sort of going back a little bit, I think one of the quote unquote risks of putting a lot of premieres on a performance is, you don't know what you're going to get. Like maybe they all feel great, maybe they don't feel great. But to me, I sort of felt like they would be great as long as I developed a relationship with the composers. Through those conversations, I think it sort of became clear, maybe this would work for this instrument.
Well, initially, I'll just say I wanted to write a piece for tenor saxophone, and I sent Stephen some ideas, and he played it on tenor, but then he played it on baritone saxophone. And Steve, I was blown away because Stephen has one of the most beautiful, gorgeous baritone sax sounds that I've ever heard in my life. It's
Truly, yeah.
gorgeous.
The low register is magnificent.
So it was a no-brainer for me, but I had to hear it though. I had to hear it.
Stephen, it's so fascinating to hear you talk about getting to know your colleagues, because having gotten to know you a bit, you have such a high standard for when you're ready to be on stage with a piece of music. And in an ordinary world, you would be workshopping these premieres in front of lots of different people. And somehow you had to sort of like warp speed through time so that you could get on stage without all of that, but feel the great confidence in exactly what Jenny was talking about, that these are very polished premieres.
Going back, I think the one thing is just the fact that when I was practicing, I wanted to get to the point where I could say, I think Saad will like this. I think Saad would want me to play it this way. And if I wasn't sure, then I'd FaceTime Saad and say, Saad, which one of these do you like? What do you want me to prioritize here? Because this part's really hard. I don't know if I'll get it all, but what do you really want me to get with this? It was really difficult because specifically with Saad's piece, I mean, the collaborative aspect between saxophone and piano is very difficult. Things that fit together in very sort of funky ways. And it just took Zach and I some good rehearsal time to sit there with a metronome on, feeling that, the 10 in one hand of the piano against me playing 16th notes. It's just sort of difficult because there weren't, all of the opportunities to sort of workshop it live with the composers. I felt like I needed to have their voice in my head so that we could try to do it on our own.
I love that that all three pieces occupy a lot of real estate in the program. It was risky, absolutely, because you don't know how it's going to turn out, but yet it grounds the program in so many ways. Hearing the instruments used and hearing your expressive abilities as a composer and as a performer. I mean, this program is pretty monumental when you look at all the different components and the quartet and the new works and the classical works, and turning to you as a composer and a very personal piece that you created. Stephen, can you say a little bit about that? Is this something that that you'll continue to focus on as part of your overall work as a teacher and composer and performer?
Yes, definitely. I think that I always tell even just, my students that when I first started composing, I think I immediately became a better performer. I just had to think a little bit differently. And I became a little bit less obsessed with myself as a saxophone player and, getting the right fingerings and whatever, and more so with trying to think about what this is, like, what is this piece? And how can I convey what it is in a really concrete way? For me, that is something that I think put all of these things together: teaching, performing, composing. To me, they all allow me to become just a better musician overall.
All three of you have such amazing ears as musicians. I love that the works, each work takes us in very unexpected places. And I was touched too by the program notes that each of you wrote. And Stephen, the phrase you used that really resonated with me, in addition to your writings, was the sense of two-ness, the way that people maintain and have different aspects of their lives that work in parallel and then intersect. And I was struck as listening to the works by the three of you, that, as you said in the beginning of our conversation, that there are these different aspects that show up in your work, and it comes from personal history, it comes from straddling different worlds, and very often, and for so many years in the arts world, you were either this or this. You weren't, you didn't cross. And just thinking about, the teaching that you all do, are you sensing that your students are more have internalized the breadth of their creativity and inspiration, or are they kind of at a starting point for interleaving their different backgrounds and inspirations. How is this next generation adapting? Do you feel they have a slightly different path than you did in certain ways?
It's a great question.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Well, I'll speak. I'm on faculty at Georgetown University, and I teach students at the undergraduate level. So they're just sort of getting started. But what I am seeing is they are interested in, popular music and infusing those styles, whatever it may be, into something that's more traditional. Finding one's voice is, I think, it's a lifelong pursuit, and it's where the students that I have, they're just at the beginning of that, and it's so exciting to kind of see that, that journey at that where they are, So yeah, and I do my best to encourage and not dismay. That's my job, to kind of show the path.
Saad, I remember being sort of particularly taken with how you were talking about sort of merging worlds, if you will, not only with this piece though, just like in your music in general, because there were some times where I was like, well, maybe we could go a little bit more in this direction, and you were like, oh, that feels a little gimmicky to me. I don't want it to feel like a gimmick or anything. Is there something that guides you?
That's a good question, because that's one of these things that has a lot to do with intuition and also just knowing a lot of repertoire. The problem with writing a piece of music is that you kind of stay on the same bar for a long time, and you guys, everybody here knows that, and you have to always remember to yourself. I mean, you always have to remind yourself that, this bar is going to pass by quickly for somebody else. So sometimes I get bogged down in that, this bar, they will tell immediately that it's some kind of lick that I took from so-and-so Arabic piece, even though most people haven't heard it. But to me, it's so famous in my ear that, okay, you shouldn't borrow that lick. But then I sometimes say, you know what, I have to kind of get away from that kind of side of my brain, just put it on the page. Stephen helped me with that kind of aspect in terms of writing this piece, especially at the beginning of the piece, the introduction of the piece, which we completely changed for the better, I think. I mean, it's a much more kind of like magical beginning, and it opens up the word, and it makes you into that mindset much more easily, I think. And it's closer to the tradition of ney playing, which is this very windy Arabic instrument. And I'm really glad that he made that suggestion, because for me, I wasn't sure. But then once I heard him play it, and then it went to the next section, which wasn't very like that at all, I said, okay, you know what? He has a point. Like, it's okay to go in this direction. It makes sense in the overall structure of the piece. So I do go back and forth a lot, but it has to do more with intuition. I don't know. There's not like a specific thing guiding me in how to do it.
I think composers for a long time now have wrestled with what influences from their personal backgrounds can come into their music. And I think there's a moment in time where the audience is ready to let some of those barriers go. And I personally hear that in all three of your pieces. And I think that's a very exciting thing. It reflects where you've come from, what's going on in the world right now. In many ways, it's what music should be.
Thinking back to a year ago when we were starting to hear about this virus that was making its way around the world, and completely perhaps unprepared for what our lives would be, and given everything that we have seen, observed, experienced, being isolated or more connected in some ways through technology. But as you look ahead past this period of isolation and moving back to a point when you can create in person, in the same practice room, studio, concert hall, are you seeing yourself in the world differently because of what you have experienced and created in this past year?
Well, I think one thing that I've learned in writing this piece and other pieces during the pandemic is that, is to slow down and just to really, really, really take your time. It's during the pandemic, I didn't have a choice. I couldn't go anywhere. I wasn't doing traveling, or and so it kind of forced me to kind of hunker down. And so I want to take that sort of mindset going forward, especially as we come out of this.
Saad and Stephen, how about for the two of you?
I will never, ever take for granted. I don't think I was necessarily taking it for granted before, but I will certainly never take for granted the intimate moments of live performance. Like there's literally nothing like it. And also for me, I'm so sort of obsessed with sound and tone, color, and all of that kind of stuff, where like, in a recording, those things, it you just can't, like, you can't have the sound wash over your audience in a recording. And so whenever I'm in a hall again, like those are the kinds of things that I just really miss. I'm going to be like, turn that microphone off, turn that thing off. Like, let's just be here together and experience this moment. Because that's really like what I miss. And that's what I feel like my whole training as a musician has been about, is how to sense that energy in a room and to work with it. And that's something that I didn't necessarily know how to put it into words until it was gone.
Saad, how about you?
It was difficult as a composer because, we're so used to being alone all the time that you forget that you're actually not really alone all the time. And during this, time, you really are alone all the time. So it's just interesting to feel that, you actually do need a lot of external influence to write music. I mean, it's a necessary thing. And you start to think about, Beethoven and his famous walks and things like this. And, you really think to yourself, wow, you really do need that external, whatever that externalness, before going and hunkering down your studio, So that's one thing I realized after this time, among many other things.
Yeah. And maybe it's about, to Carlos's point about not being pulled in, different directions in terms of traveling, that actually you can choose the ways you want to have the points of connection and sort of create that for yourself, instead of getting there's so many times when we're just pulled into things and we just sort of go, and the stopping and thinking about how we select and choose to invite those experiences and make them part of our chosen experience, as opposed to just reacting. I mean, Dan, you've been back and forth to Colorado and New York, and writing music and running YCA. So has this slowed you down and sort of allowed you to do more reflective work?
No, I'm actually the opposite of being slowed down. I've never worked harder than I have in the last year. But my answer would actually be along the lines of Stephen's, that hearing his recital, there were so many moments where the tone was just sweepingly beautiful. And I was jealous that I couldn't hear it in the room. That you just know when you're hearing a real acoustic instrument that's just gorgeous, there's nothing like it. And so we miss that. And I hope, like Stephen, I hope that I never take it for granted. Not that we necessarily did, but now it's going to taste that much sweeter.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect way to wrap up our conversation, with sort of a hope, sort of a message to the future, and how we might all reconnect and feel when we can all be in the same room together.
I'd just like to say, a very sincere thank you to all of you, because this concert literally wouldn't have happened without each of you. I was listening to the concert today, and I literally just started crying. I just started bawling, thinking about all of the work that has gone into it, all of the relationships that I've built with you guys, and the fact that this is a product that we've created, but it's been such a growing opportunity for me, and I'm really proud of what we came up with. So thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be with you all.